The memo was 3 pages long, single-spaced, and signed by 4 board members. Min-Jae read it once, set it face down on his desk, and looked out the window at the Seoul skyline for a long moment without speaking. His assistant hovered near the door, afraid to breathe too loudly. "Sir, they've requested a formal response by Friday. The petition cites." "I know what it cites. Mr. Park Hyun-Woo has also requested an emergency board meeting for next Thursday. He's framing it as a leadership review. The language he's using is compromised judgment." Min-Jae turned from the window. "Personal entanglements. Emotional instability." He said each phrase with the flat precision of someone who had already anticipated every word. "He's been drafting that document since the dinner table." His assistant swallowed. "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing yet." Min-Jae picked up the memo, folded it once, and tucked it into his inside jacket pocket like it was nothing more than a grocery receipt. "Send no response. Make no comment. And if anyone from the board calls, tell them I'm unavailable. And if your grandmother calls?" A pause. "Tell her I'll call her back." He didn't call her back. Not that day. If you're just joining this story for the first time, go back and watch part 1 first, because what's coming will hit completely different once you know how we got here. And if you've been waiting for part 2, subscribe right now so you never miss a chapter, drop a comment telling me whose side you're on, and let's get into it. Across the city, Amaka was pretending. She was very good at pretending. 7 years of matchmaking had made her an expert at performing composure in rooms where everyone was watching and nobody was kind. She sat across from a new client, a shipping executive looking for a discreet match, and she smiled at the right moments, asked the right questions, and said absolutely nothing about the fact that her hands hadn't stopped trembling since the parking garage 2 nights ago. Her assistant, a sharp-eyed young woman named June who noticed everything, waited until the client left, and then stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. "You haven't eaten today." "I had coffee." "Coffee isn't food." "Yivung." "You also canceled 2 calls this morning, rescheduled your afternoon, and I found you staring at the same page of a client file for 20 minutes before you turned it over and started staring at the back." Ji-yoon stepped into the office fully. "What's happening?" Amaka leaned back in her chair and looked at the ceiling. "Nothing I can explain right now." "Is it the Park family situation?" "The Park family situation." As if that covered it. As if situation was anywhere near the right word for what the last week had been. "Go home, June," Amaka said quietly. "I'll lock up." Ji-yoon looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look that said she had more to say and was choosing not to. Then she nodded, gathered her things, and left. Amaka waited until she heard the front door close. Then she opened the bottom drawer of her desk, reached past 2 client folders and a spare phone charger, and pulled out a worn manila envelope she hadn't touched in 5 years. She opened it slowly. Inside, a name, a contact number, a city. Notes she had written in her own hand, the night she took an off-the-books job that nobody was supposed to know about. The job that had broken a woman free from a man who was already married. The job that Hyun-Woo had just tried to use to destroy her. Adiz. Macau. Amaka stared at the name for a long time. The dinner table played back in her mind. Min-Jae, standing up, voice carrying across the room, choosing her in front of everyone when it would have been so much easier not to. She thought about grandmother Hyun-Woo watching from the head of the table, sharp eyes calculating the cost of everything. She thought about Hyun-Woo's pale face in the parking garage, the folder in his hand, the certainty in his voice when he thought he'd already won. He hadn't won, but he wasn't finished either. Amaka picked up her phone, put it down, picked it up again. She opened a flight booking app. The next morning, grandmother Choi Hyun's personal driver arrived at Amaka's agency at 9 sharp. No call ahead, no explanation, just a man in a black suit holding open a car door. Amaka knew better than to ask questions. She got in. The drive to the Choi estate was 20 minutes of silence. Hyun was waiting in the same formal sitting room, in the same high-backed chair, with the same unreadable expression. But this time, there was no teacup, no performance of hospitality, just a woman who had decided to be direct. "Min-Jae isn't here," Hyun said before Amaka could sit. "I asked you to come alone deliberately." "I noticed." "Sit down, Miss Amaka." Amaka sat. Hyun studied her for a moment with those sharp, calculating eyes. I want to say something to you that I have not said to my grandson, and I would ask that it remain between us. I'm listening. I believe you were telling the truth at dinner. The words were precise, measured, not warm but honest. About Hyun-Woo, about the engagement, about your reasons. She paused. I have made inquiries of my own since that night. Quietly. What I found was consistent with your account. Amaka's chest tightened. Then you know I wasn't lying. I know you weren't lying, Hyun agreed. But knowing the truth and acting on it are two different things when you are responsible for an empire. She folded her hands in her lap. What Hyun-Woo did was wrong. What he is doing now is dangerous. But the attention this arrangement has drawn, the board petition, the whispers, the instability, that is also real. And my first responsibility is always to the family's survival. The room went very quiet. What are you asking me to do? Amaka said carefully. I'm giving you a choice. Hyun's voice was not unkind. That almost made it worse. Walk away from the arrangement. Dissolve it quietly, on your own terms, before Hyun-Woo finds another angle. I will ensure your agency's client list remains intact. You will lose nothing professionally. She held a mawkish gaze. Stay, and I cannot protect you for what he does next. He is not a man who accepts losing. Amaka was silent for a moment. And Min-Jae, my grandson, made his choice at that dinner table. Whatever happens next is a consequence of that choice. Something flickered behind Hyun's eyes. Not cruelty, but the kind of hardness that comes from decades of making impossible decisions. I'm trying to give you an exit before the consequences find you. Amaka stood slowly, smoothed her jacket, picked up her bag. Thank you for being honest with me, she said. Hyun watched her. You haven't given me an answer. No, Amaka said quietly. I haven't. She left without looking back. But in the car on the way home, her hands were shaking again, and this time it wasn't fear. It was a decision forming. Min-Jae found out about the private meeting through his estate housekeeper, who mentioned it in passing while discussing the week's schedule. Just that, grandmother had a visitor this morning. The matchmaker. He was at Amaka's agency within the hour. She was still at her desk when he walked in. June, wisely, making herself invisible the moment she saw his expression, and he closed the office door behind him with a controlled click that was somehow louder than a slam. She called you in alone, he said. Not a question. Amaka looked up from her desk. Yes, and you didn't tell me. It happened this morning. You're here now. Amaka. His voice dropped, that particular quiet that meant he was working very hard to stay composed. What did she say to you? She gave me an exit. Amaka held his gaze evenly. Walk away from the arrangement, keep my clients, lose nothing professionally. She was almost kind about it. Something moved through Min-Jae's expression. Fast, controlled, painful. And what did you tell her? I told her I hadn't decided yet. The silence that followed was thick and sharp-edged. Min-Jae moved to the window, turned away from her, one hand pressed against the frame. When he turned back, his expression had shifted into something she hadn't seen on him before. Not the cold composure, not the calculated calm. Something rawer. Why didn't you come to me first? Because it wasn't your meeting to attend, Amaka said. She came to me. My choice. My answer to give. I am the reason you're in this position. Yes, Amaka said sharply. You are. You engineered 3 failed matches, manipulated your grandmother's hand, and pulled me into the middle of a family war without asking me first. So don't stand in my office and tell me I owe you a phone call every time someone from your family wants to talk to me. The words landed hard. Min-Jae absorbed them without flinching, which somehow made it worse. You're right, he said quietly. I did all that. And I would tell you I'm sorry, except that would imply I wish it had gone differently, and I don't. He stepped closer to the desk, voice dropping. I don't wish it had gone differently, Amaka. That's the problem. I keep waiting for the part where I regret pulling you into this, and it hasn't come. The room felt very small suddenly. That's not an apology, she said. No, it's not. He held her gaze. What do you want me to say? That I'll fix it? I'm trying. That you should walk away? I can't tell you that. That this arrangement was just strategy from the beginning. He exhaled slowly. We both know that stopped being true a long time ago. Amaka looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked down at her desk, at the manila envelope she hadn't put back in the drawer. "There's something I need to do," she said quietly. "I need you to trust me and not ask questions until it's done." Min-Jae's eyes dropped to the envelope, back to her face. "What is that?" "Trust me," she said again. A long pause. Then, "When have you ever given me a reason not to?" If you're watching this and your chest is tight right now, good. That means the story is working. Drop a comment with one word for how you're feeling right now, and smash that like button, because we're just getting to the part that changes everything. She left at 5 the next morning. A carry-on bag, her passport, the manila envelope tucked inside her jacket. She left a note on Ji-Yoon's desk, back in 48 hours. Hold everything. And she was in a taxi to the airport before the city was fully awake. Macau was 4 hours away. She spent 3 of them staring out the plane window, rehearsing what she would say to a woman she had spoken to exactly once, 5 years ago, for less than 10 minutes. The city greeted her with gray skies and heavy humidity. She took a taxi to an address she had memorized rather than written down, a residential block in Kotai. Nothing grand, nothing that would draw attention. She stood outside the building for 2 full minutes before going in. The woman who opened the door on the 3rd floor was in her mid-30s, Nigerian, with tired eyes and the particular stillness of someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible. She looked at Amaka on her doorstep, and the color drained from her face. "How did you find me?" "The same way I found you 5 years ago," Amaka said quietly. "I'm good at finding people who don't want to be found." She paused. "Can I come in? Please. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here because someone tried to use what I did for you to destroy me, and I think the only way to stop him is if you come back with me." The woman, Adiz, stared at her for a long, taut moment. Then she stepped back and opened the door wider. The apartment was small and very clean. Adiz moved to the kitchen and put the kettle on with the automatic precision of someone who needed something to do with her hands. "He sent you," she said back-turned. "He didn't send me. He doesn't even know I'm here." "Then who did?" "Nobody." Amaka sat down without being invited, because she recognized the energy in the room. A woman braced for impact, waiting for the other shoe. "I came on my own, because 5 years ago you were about to marry a man who already had a wife, and I made sure that didn't happen. And now that man is using that story, twisted, inverted, made to look like I manipulated an innocent woman to destroy my reputation and take down someone she stopped. Steadied herself. Someone who stood up for me when he didn't have to." Adiz turned from the kettle. Her eyes were careful, searching. "And what do you want from me?" "The marriage certificate," Amaka said. "Whatever documentation you have. And I want you to come to Seoul and say what you know in front of the one person in that family whose opinion actually matters." The silence stretched long enough that Amaka felt the trip might have been for nothing. Then Adiz said, "I've been invisible for 5 years because he made sure I had nothing and no one. You understand that?" He didn't just walk away. He dismantled everything. My accounts, my contacts, my references. He made sure that if I ever tried to surface, nobody would believe me. "I believe you," Amaka said simply. Something cracked in Adiz's expression. Small, quick, like a door opening an inch before she caught it. "What if it doesn't work?" she asked. "What if we go there and they still take his side?" Amaka leaned forward. "Then at least you will have said it out loud, in a room full of people who needed to hear it, and nobody will be able to say you stayed quiet because you were afraid." She held Adiz's gaze. "You've been invisible long enough. Let someone see you." Adiz looked at her for a long time. Then she set down her teacup, stood up, and walked to the bedroom. She came back with a folder. Inside was a marriage certificate dated 6 years ago, bearing both their names. Legal, legitimate, notarized, never dissolved. Amaka looked at it and exhaled slowly. "Pack a bag," she said. "We leave tomorrow morning." Back in Seoul, Min-Jae was unraveling quietly. Not visibly, never visibly. To his assistant, to his lawyers, to the 3 board members who called requesting his response to the petition, he was exactly what he always was: measured, precise, impenetrable. He answered their questions. He signed what needed signing. He moved through each hour of the 2 days with the same controlled calm that had carried him through every crisis before this one. But Amaka wasn't back yet, and he didn't know where she was. June had only told him the note said 48 hours. Nothing else. He hadn't pushed because he had told her he trusted her, and he had meant it. But trust, he was discovering, was significantly harder to maintain at 2 in the morning when the agency phone went to voicemail, and there was no way to confirm she was safe. On the second evening, his phone rang. Unknown international number. He picked up on the first ring. "I'm back," Amaka said. "I have someone with me. We're going to your grandmother's house tonight. Do not come until I call you." "Amaka, do you trust me?" A pause. 1 heartbeat. 2. "Yes." "Then wait." She hung up. He sat with the phone in his hand for a full minute, then set it down and did the hardest thing he had done in years. He waited. Hyun did not look surprised when Amaka was announced. She looked, if anything, faintly curious, the expression of someone watching a game unfold in a direction they hadn't fully predicted. She received them in the formal sitting room, the same room where she had offered Amaka an exit 2 days ago, and she looked at Adiz with the careful, measuring attention she gave everything. "Sit down," she said, not unkindly. They sat. Amaka placed a folder on the table between them without preamble. "Before you open that," she said, "I want to say something." She held the grandmother's gaze. "You told me 2 days ago that you believed I was telling the truth. You also told me you couldn't act on it because the stability of this family comes first." She paused. "I'm not asking you to act on my word anymore. I brought you something better. I brought you a witness." Hyun looked at Adiz. "Who are you?" Adiz's hands were folded in her lap, very still. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. "My name is Adiz. 6 years ago, I married your grandson's cousin in a private ceremony in Macau. He told me it would be formalized properly once his family accepted the relationship." She glanced down at the folder. "It never was. 18 months later, he stopped answering my calls. 2 years after that, I found out he had announced an engagement to a Korean heiress." She looked back at Hyun. "I'm still legally his wife. That document is the original certificate. I have the notarized copies as well." The room was very quiet. Hyun opened the folder. She read slowly, thoroughly, with the focus of someone who had spent decades reading contracts and finding the detail that mattered most. When she finished, she closed it and set her hands flat on the table. "Hyun-Woo," she said to her waiting housekeeper. "Bring him here." Amaka's phone buzzed in her pocket. She stepped just outside the room and answered it. "Tell me what's happening," Min-Jae said. "Your grandmother just asked for Hyun-Woo." Her voice was low, steady. "It's already done, Min-Jae. Come now." He arrived in 8 minutes, which meant he had been in his car the moment she'd called, already moving. He walked into the sitting room to find Amaka standing near the window, Adiz seated beside her, and his grandmother at the center of the room with the stillness of someone who had already passed judgment and was waiting for the convicted man to walk in. Min-Jae looked at Amaka. She looked back at him. He crossed the room without a word and stood beside her. And that, the simple fact of where he positioned himself without being asked, made something in her chest loosen for the first time in days. Hyun-Woo arrived, looking composed, polished, completely certain he was walking into another opportunity. That certainty lasted exactly as long as it took him to see Adiz. The color left his face so fast it was almost audible. "Grandmother, whatever you've been told." "Sit down, Hyun-Woo," Hyun said. "I can explain." I said sit down. He sat. What followed was not an explosion. Hyun was not a woman who exploded. What she did was methodical, surgical, and in many ways far more devastating than shouting. She placed the marriage certificate on the table in front of him. She asked him to confirm his signature. He tried to deflect, and she stopped him. She asked again. He tried to reframe, and she stopped him again. Then she said, in a voice so quiet it barely carried across the room, "You stood in front of this family and accused this woman of lying to destroy your engagement. You filed a petition against my grandson, citing his compromised judgment. And the entire time, you were a married man." She let the silence sit. Not incompetence, Hyun-Woo. Deliberate. Calculated. Designed to protect yourself at the expense of everyone in this room. Hyun-Woo's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The petition is withdrawn as of tonight. Hyun continued. Your access to the family's accounts is suspended pending a full review. You will not attend Thursday's board meeting. She looked at him with an expression that held no anger, only something colder and more final. And you will not speak to Miss Amaka again, in any capacity, for any reason. Are we understood? A long, terrible silence. Yes, Hyun-Woo said. The word came out like something broken. Hyun looked at him for one more moment. Then she looked away. The dismissal, so complete, it was almost physical. You may go. He went. The room exhaled. Hyun sat for a long moment after the door closed, perfectly still. Then she looked at Adiz. There are legal resources available through our family's council. Whatever documentation you need to formally resolve your situation, it will be provided. She paused. I am sorry you were made invisible for so long. Adiz blinked, nodded once, quickly, like she didn't trust herself to speak. Then Hyun looked at Amaka, a long, measuring look that carried the weight of every conversation they'd had since that first morning in this room. You did not have to come back, she said. Amaka held her gaze. No, I didn't. You had an exit. A clean one. Something shifted in the grandmother's expression. Not warmth exactly, but the closest thing to it that a woman like Hyun could offer. Why didn't you take it? Amaka was quiet for a moment. Then, because walking away clean has never felt like winning to me. Hyun studied her for one more beat. Then she nodded, small, deliberate, the kind of nod that meant something. Outside, in the courtyard, the night air was cool and still. Min-Jae found her sitting on the stone steps, heels off, jacket pulled around her shoulders, staring at nothing in particular with the expression of someone completely wrung out. He sat beside her without being invited, without checking if it was okay. You flew to Macau, he said. Yes. Alone. Without telling me. Yes. And brought back the one person who could end all of it. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. Why didn't you just take the exit she offered you? Your agency would have been fine. You could have walked away from all of this, from me, and rebuilt without any of it following you. Amaka turned to look at him. In the low light of the courtyard, his face was unguarded in a way she had only seen once before, in the back of a car, late at night, when he had told her not to pretend for a few hours. Because you stood up at that dinner table, she said quietly, in front of your entire family, knowing what it would cost you, and you chose me. Not the strategy. Me. She held his gaze. Nobody has ever done that before. I wasn't going to let it count for nothing. Min-Jae looked at her for a long, still moment. Then he reached out and took her hand. Not the careful, performed gesture from the gala. Not the strategic touch for watching eyes. Just his hand around hers, steady and real and not going anywhere. This isn't over, he said quietly. Hyun-Woo losing his position doesn't mean he's finished. Men like him don't disappear, they regroup. I know. Which means whoever helped him dig into your past, whoever leaked those screenshots to him in the first place, Min-Jae's jaw tightened, is still out there, and now they know you're the reason he fell. Amaka felt the shift in the air between them. The warmth of what had just been resolved giving way to the chill of what was still coming. Then we deal with it, she said. Together, he said. Not a question. Together, she agreed. Somewhere beyond the estate walls, soul hummed and glittered, indifferent and relentless. And in the quiet of the courtyard, holding the hand of a man she had never planned to fall for, Amaka understood for the first time that she had not just saved his inheritance tonight. She had chosen her own life. Whatever came next, and something was coming, she could feel it. She would face it standing up. If this story had you forgetting to breathe, you are exactly who I make these for. Subscribe so you don't miss part 3 because Hyun-Woo is not done and the person who fed him Amaka secrets is still in the shadows. And when that truth comes out, nothing will be the same. Drop a comment telling me what you think happens next and hit that like button if you want part 3 sooner rather than later. I'll see you in the next one.